Survive and advance. It wasn't pretty, but Iowa gets the win and punches their ticket into the Sweet 16. Sydney Affolter, the difference in this one. We break it all down today. Locked on Hawkeyes.
You are Locked on Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts. You can also find us on YouTube. While you're there, make sure you hit the subscribe button. It helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers, join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. A win for the Iowa women as they march on to the Sweet 16 for the second consecutive season. This one, as it has been in the round of 32 the last couple of years, was incredibly difficult. A West Virginia team that came in with a game plan, and boy, did they play it at a high level. Ultimately, though, Iowa does enough to get the victory, and it really going to be remembered, I think, for a long time as a Sydney Affolter play. One play late in the game that proved to be the difference in a tie ball game. But as we go through it and look at this basketball game, you saw early on, West Virginia jumps out to a 5-0 lead. Their physicality that they played with was something that Iowa knew was going to be the case coming into it. There's no doubt about that, but it really impacted what Iowa wanted to do, and that style of West Virginia. Not a big team. We talked about that as we previewed things yesterday here, that was exactly what they were going to do this evening. The physicality, I think, at times took Iowa out of what they wanted to do. It slowed them down. They were able to play West Virginia at the tempo they wanted this game. They played their game plan basically to perfection outside of foul trouble. I mean, this is exactly how it had to go in a night where Caitlin Clark got it going a little bit after the slow start. Iowa down 5-0, tie it back up. Then here comes West Virginia again. They came roaring back, 3 3-pointers in the first quarter for Caitlin Clark. But she finishes the game with just 3 assists against 6 turnovers, and something that we're just not accustomed to. That is a season low in assists for Caitlin Clark this season. Though the 3-pointers that she made early in the game were all hugely important. Had one late in the second quarter. That was a second quarter, though, that was not a thing of beauty. And every single time throughout the course of this evening where it felt like Iowa was going to maintain control, that they were going to grab a hold of this one and really maybe cruise into the victory, West Virginia had a response every single time until late in the basketball game. I'll mention the second quarter. After Iowa gets down early, come back, take the lead 2015 going into the second quarter, Iowa scores just 6 points in the second quarter. I can't remember a game offhand that Iowa scored 6 points in a quarter. That's just not the style of play that they are in. I mean, this team, even well before Caitlin Clark, is such a good offensive team year in and year out under Lisa Bluter. It's just not anything that you anticipate is going to happen with this squad. There are going to be times that they're outscored. We've seen that happen plenty of times in the past, but not like this. And to get a victory in this style of game, I think says a lot about this squad. 6 points, you go into the halftime locker room with a 26-24 lead. But they come out of the third quarter locker room, once again, heating up from the outside, getting everything going. I thought Stolke was outstanding on what she was able to do inside in a very physical game. I mean, the way that they allow some of the just muggings at times inside in the post play is something that is just, it's not an enjoyable watch. A style like that is not a fun watch unless it's your team and you're winning playing basketball games that way. But inside, just in general, in women's college basketball, it is something that needs to be cleaned up for the betterment of the sport. You can't allow the kind of physicality. I mean, you look late in the game, you had the hook where Stolke went down to the ground, and because her arm was grabbed and held on to, she wasn't able to brace her fall, falls on her face. Looked like that could have been a substantial injury. Luckily, not the case for Hannah and for the rest of us Hawkeye fans that wasn't the case, but just so physical inside. I thought she did some great things, had 4 block shots in the game, a double-double for her with 12 and 11. She was really good in a day where Kate Martin just didn't have it going. They were able to find different avenues, and certainly one of those was Sydney Affolter. Back, though, and looking throughout the course of this game. I walked away so impressed by West Virginia. And we talked about the history as well. 2 years ago, it was a loss at home on a weekend afternoon against Creighton in the round of 32. It was a frustrating one and a game where the shots just were not falling from the outside. And ultimately, they were able to get it done. A year ago in the round of 32, it was Georgia that gave Iowa everything that they wanted. And that one came down to the wire, and Iowa had to pull this one out. And the same thing here. So I, I will say this to you. If you're going to use this game as some kind of indictment that this team can't win a national championship, that this team can't get back to a Final Four, get back to playing in the national championship game, and you point just to this game, I think that's unfair. And Caitlin Clark said it after the game. This is one of the hardest rounds of the NCAA tournament. You're at home, and you have the juice at home, but you have all the pressure. You have all the pressure in this game. And we've seen teams that have gone awry. A year ago, Stanford, a number 1 seed, went down to Ole Miss. We've seen this happen plenty of times in the past. In Iowa, it's about surviving and advancing. And something that, for whatever reason, has been a trouble the last 3 years. They found a way to get it done. And ultimately, that is the difference. Speaking of difference, Sydney Affolter was the difference. We'll get into her big play and take a look forward for this Iowa basketball team. Plus, coming up today, we got some news and notes, some different Hawkeye nuggets that are out there, some different things, some rumblings, some things that we're going to pass along to you, and a little bit of the rumor mill that is out there. We got a little football. We got some men's basketball. We'll get into all of that here throughout the course. But it's Instant Reaction Podcast here after the Iowa win 64-54 as they beat West Virginia and move on to the Sweet 16. And now make the easy trip to Albany, New York. The NCAA has screwed this up mightily. This is a travesty. It really is. For a sport that is growing by leaps and bounds, for a sport that is now in the national spotlight, to have 2 sites for the Sweet 16, fine. That's what you want to do. A year ago, it was Greensboro for South Carolina. Makes a lot of sense. Obviously, the power team from a year ago until they faced the Iowa Hawkeyes in the Final Four. And they also put it out in Seattle. So you come back this year and you put it in Portland, and you put it in Albany, New York. These are not easy destinations. And we're not asking for things just to be set up for Iowa. Though it'd be great. That's not the case. But to have sites like this, not major hub cities, not places that are easy to get to, not places that are drivable for fan bases across the country, to put them in far outposts. If you're going to put it in New York, don't put it in Albany. Albany? Come on. But New York City. Do something there. Let's liven things up a little bit. Actually put it in a place that people can get to. A lot easier than it is to get to Albany, because we know there's a lot of Hawkeye fans that will love to make this trip. And though there'll be plenty that'll make their way out to New York, it's not cheap. It's not an easy place to get to. It's a long drive. It is difficult. Put it in hub cities. Put it in Denver. Put it in Atlanta. Put it in Chicago. Put it in Dallas. Put it in places that make sense. If you're growing your sport, you want to continue to grow your sport. Yes, it'll sell out. It's not about that. And the TV numbers will be immense. But you want to have the best environment possible. Grow up. And that's what you need to do. You need to grow your sport. And growing your sport is not putting in these little outposts and making it good for schools like Connecticut or easy for West Coast schools. No, this is a national sport. Act like it. This is a travesty. But I will be there. And that's the most important thing for what we're doing. Let's get into Sid Affolter, Caitlin Clark, and the crew. Dive deeper into the matchup. And before we get into our news and notes here on the Hawkeye front, it's an Instant Reaction Podcast. Iowa with the win, 64-54 over West Virginia. Colorado is up next. We'll get into all that as we continue. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. Today's episode of the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or the number 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Easy as that. $200 to use on everything. From point spreads, money lines, get into the futures market with who's going to win it all, who's going to advance to the Final Four. You can bet it all on FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Today's episode of the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast is also brought to you by eBay Motors. eBay Motors has passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Trent Condon back with you once again on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. As always, thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Diving deeper into this one, and we've talked about it a couple of different times, but it was the difference in this one. The sequence with about 2 minutes to play in the ball game as Gabby Marshall, little bit late getting over, but gets the block shot, a deflection that leads to a run out for Iowa. The ball settles into the hands as it kind of flutters there near the free throw line after the block from Marshall into the hands of Sydney Affolter. Another rebound for Affolter. She gets it. Caitlin Clark's right next to her. Sid puts her head down, gets to midcourt, does a little spin, sees the defender out on her right hip, spins the other way, comes back to the top of the key, and then sees a lane. And this is why Sydney Affolter, as we've talked about throughout the course of this season, is so important to this team. She can handle it. She can rebound. She can drive. She can shoot. She can do so many different things. She is a complete basketball player. With her size and her versatility, she is a huge cog of this Iowa team. And if Iowa's going to make a run back to a Final Four, if they're going to win 2 games in Albany and punch their ticket to Cleveland, Sydney Affolter has to play at the level that we saw from her tonight. And really what we've seen from her over the last 5 games. After the injury to Molly Davis, this is what you need out of Affolter. She is a player that can hurt you in so many different ways of what she does on both ends of the floor. That play, though, 2 minutes to go, tie ball game. Everything's tightening up. I mean, the fan base, you could feel the nervous energy in the crowd. It was really a scene unlike anything that we've seen throughout the course of this season. You go back to the home loss against Kansas State back during the non-conference portion of the season. There was a little bit of that angst, but it was still so early in the season. You knew there was a lot in front of you. It wasn't going to cost you anything in the grand scheme of things. And you could feel it at that time. But this was completely different because you lose this one, it's over. I mean, it's as simple as that. And you could feel that inside the building. It was not, I guess, a normal crowd that we're used to. And one of the reasons is the style of play that West Virginia played. And they're out there just kind of handsy, playing very physical and making it incredibly difficult. But then taking the drive, getting to the rim, taking the contact, maybe create a little bit of contact, absorbing it, going up, finishing with the left hand, get the 3-point play, and finally some breathing room. One of the craziest aspects about that play was Iowa's only made field goal of the fourth quarter, as they score 16 points in the fourth quarter. The other 14, though, came from the free throw line. Just one bucket in the fourth quarter. They went a long stretch without making a field goal. They had a stretch of over 8 minutes without a field goal. That one, though, absolutely huge. The defense was outstanding, and something needs to be said about that. This is a team that has obviously been built on offense, been built on Caitlin Clark and her great playmaking ability and what she does. But to play defense the way that they did against West Virginia, really commendable. They're open shots, but they changed defenses. A huge aspect, too, is just not just about the defense. And though they gave up some open threes that West Virginia just missed, I loved what they did with the triangle and 2. And making the decision right away when they went out there a couple of different times, going with that triangle and 2. They were just going to face guard Quinn Early and Harrison. They're 2 guards, really 2 point guards out there that are so good defensively, but also can hurt you on the other end. Hold them to 7 of 17 shooting overall in the basketball game. That was monstrous, and ultimately both of those players fouled out of the game. It was huge. But another aspect that needs to be mentioned, and we talked about the rebounds from Hannah Stuelke with the double-double with 12 and 11, 10 rebounds from Kate Martin, 8 from Caitlin Clark, 7 from Affolter. All these different players is they out-rebound West Virginia. The physicality of West Virginia, though Iowa's taller, still playing a physical team like that to out-rebound them and do it while you're playing so much zone defense, that's tough to do. And Iowa really maintained the edge on the glass. That was monstrous in this one. Just 5 of 22 shooting from behind the arc. Iowa overall 7 of 47 from the field in this game. Look, there's a lot of Iowa teams in the quarter century of Lisa Bluter coaching. There's no way they can win with only 17 made field goals. You just can't. And yet they found a way, and they move on here. Gabby Marshall doesn't score, but that block shot will be remembered for a very long time. And what she did defensively, both against Harrison and Quinn Early, she was really good on that front. We mentioned Affolter, 13.7 rebounds, 2 assists in the game, the 4 blocks and the double-double from Stolke, in a game where just 4 players even score a point for Iowa. Incredible. Veerbach played 10 minutes, didn't get a bucket. 4 minutes apiece for O'Grady and for Taylor McCabe. McCabe wasn't able to squeeze off a shot. You saw O'Grady just didn't have it, and they're going to need her. I still maintain they're going to need Addison O'Grady to have a good performance against somebody, and it might be coming up this week against Colorado. We'll continue to break that game down here throughout the course of the week. Tip-off time has been set for the matchup against the Buffaloes. Of course, the team that they saw a year ago in the Sweet 16. That one was a tight one. 4-point game. I believe with about 5 minutes to go before Iowa eventually pulled away and got the victory, setting up their matchup with Louisville in the Elite Eight game out in Seattle. This Colorado team returns 4 starters from a year ago. They also, their 5th starter this year is a transfer from Michigan. I've seen a whole lot of Iowa. Redemption, payback, those are going to be big storylines throughout the course of the week. That will be a 2:30 tip-off Central Time on Saturday afternoon. ABC will have it. It'll open up at noon with LSU against UCLA. UCLA had to come roaring back to beat Creighton, one that came down to the wire, and a nice victory for UCLA team that is going to be fun to watch, and we'll see LSU on the other side of that. And we talked about the difficult matchups here that Iowa got and the quote-unquote bracket of death that they got. It's tough. Colorado is going to be an incredibly difficult matchup. As mentioned, we'll talk about that more throughout the course of this week and dive a little bit deeper. But for those starters back from a year ago, I think that's going to be a huge part of what we talk about there. On that side, though, LSU, UCLA should be a really good one. I'll be interested to see what the point spread is when that comes out. FanDuel, when the NCAA tournament bracket was announced, LSU was the betting favorite to come out of the region. We'll see if that's something that continues. Let's see. Right now, Albany, here we go. We got updated. Don't have point spreads yet for the games coming up as we sit here late on Monday night into Tuesday morning, but they do have the odds to win the Albany 2 regional. Iowa is now the betting favorite at plus 110. LSU, the second betting choice, at plus 145. UCLA at plus 460. And there's Colorado at 16-1. Now their path is going to be difficult. They'd have to beat, of course, number 1 seed Iowa, and then the winner of LSU, UCLA. Colorado, talked about it last year. They were right there with Iowa, had a chance to win that game, a team that played for a national championship. And the first game of the season, by the way, Colorado not just beat LSU, they absolutely wiped the floor with the Tigers. LSU's playing much better than they were back at that time. And all kinds of weird stuff that was happening during the non-conference portion of the season with Angel Reese and Kim Mulkey. We'll see if she's going to be suing the Washington Post. Oh, what an idiot she is. Oh, boy. She's bothersome. Hopefully we won't have to worry about her until next Monday night in an Elite Eight matchup. But before that, we got a lot on our plate. Still 16-1 for the Buffaloes. I made dumber bets than that. Certainly in mind. The other one that is up is the Albany Regional, the Albany 1 region. South Carolina, a huge betting favorite there. They're minus 750, meaning you got to lay $750 just to win 100 back if you want to bet on South Carolina, or 75 to win 10 bucks. Maybe a better way to look at it for most of us out there. Notre Dame, the second choice at 10-1. Oregon State at 13-1. And there's Indiana at 36-1 after they come back and get the win. LSU had to come back to beat Middle Tennessee, and they blew them out eventually in their round of 32 game. There's good matchups, and we saw a lot of good ones here tonight. Indiana, congratulations to them. Mackenzie Holmes and company moving on and giving us 2 teams from the Big Ten in the Sweet 16. But again, 2:30 will be the tip time for Iowa, Colorado, Saturday afternoon. And then next Monday night, the Elite Eight coming out of this region is what we will see. We continue Locked On Hawkeyes. Some news and notes. Caden Proctor, is it a foregone conclusion that he is leaving the University of Iowa for Alabama, going back to, well, his first destination out of high school? A lot of rumblings about that. I'll tell you what I know and what I have heard. We'll get into that. A few other things as well. We got a little baseball note for you, little men's basketball to get into as well as we continue rolling through an instant reaction. Iowa moves on to the Sweet 16 on the women's side of things with the win against West Virginia. Stay right there as we continue. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. This week's March Madness bracket highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week, we're picking one team that stands out, a team that pushed it further than the rest. Just like any of the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs, these guys were able to take it to the next level. The North Carolina Tar Heels can only be described as an armada. This one seed is as hardcore as it gets out there, and it's no wonder they secured a spot in the Sweet 16 this Thursday as they take on Alabama in the NCAA tournament. They're a favorite, picked by many to make a run for a championship. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. That's NissanUSA.com. Trent Condon back with you one final time on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. As always, thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. All right, it's out there. It is rumblings. It is a whole lot of conversation about the big man, Caden Proctor. And though he broke the hearts of many Hawkeye fans out there, the potential of solidifying an offensive line that has been bad the last two seasons, helping out, getting guys in a more natural position, and the improvement that we thought we were going to see this season, that's off the board. He is leaving, and most everybody anticipated it was going to be Alabama. But there's been rumblings. Now, is it just that? Is it message board fodder? Is it Twitter? Is it Facebook? Is it Instagram? Wherever your social media of choice is, because it's out there. The Caden Proctor is not going to Alabama. He's staying in the state of Iowa and not in Iowa City. He is going to Ames. What I can tell you is when these rumblings began. And we told you right here on Locked On Hawkeyes about those rumblings back in December that Caden Proctor was potentially going to be looking around for a new home and that Iowa City was likely the destination. We had that right. Just didn't last as long as we hoped for. The Iowa State angle, though, when those rumblings were first starting, what I was told is that there were overtures made with Iowa State, and very quickly he realized, or his camp realized, that the NIL money wasn't there. It just wasn't close. And it was something that was just, at that point, not negotiable. Now, that is just that. Rumblings. There's nothing concrete. There was no conversation with even, I don't believe, the NIL group. I think it was a general understanding, though, about what it is and what Iowa State football players were getting. But those conversations have revved up again, and they have been out there, and they have continued. Is there a big Iowa State booster that can make it? Well, there is. There's certainly Iowa State boosters that have the money that could make this right. Does Matt Campbell want to make it happen? We will see. But for any hope, any glimmer of hope that you might have, the transfer portal for football still isn't even open. The Caden Proctor is going to come to his senses and everything's going to be all right. Don't hold on to that. Likely the only chance you're going to see Caden Proctor play in Iowa City next season is going to be in week 2 with Iowa State. I don't think it's a great shot. I still think that it is a 98% chance that he is back in Alabama, and that's where it is. But I know conversations happened well before we got to this point with Iowa State. Can they make it work? And ultimately, is it what Caden Proctor wants? I think the young man has got a lot of bad advice. I think he doesn't have the right people in his ear. And I also have a concern about him willing to put in the necessary hard work to hit his apex. Natural talent is through the roof, not just the physical style, but the dominating nature that he can be as an offensive tackle. But when you make your way to Iowa City and you're not with teammates, you want to live alone. When you're going to sporting events by yourself, there's just something off. There's something off really from the get-go of this and the way that it was in just his 2 months that he was a part of the Iowa football program. It's going to take work. He showed up to Alabama out of shape. Now he is not going through spring practice this season. Now he is going to be kind of to his own devices for the next couple of months. They had to work him into shape a year ago at Alabama. And when they did, you saw how good he was at the end of the season. That is out there. A couple other things. I want to pass this along. I mentioned it yesterday on the podcast, so I had to look it up. And we were talking about the men's basketball team as their season came to a close after the loss to Utah on Sunday night. More of the same, right? Terrible defense, just brutal. Wide open threes all over the place, just hideous. Rotations are bad. Look like they have no clue. And I don't know what it's going to take. Look, it's not like Matt Gatens doesn't know how to play defense, right? It doesn't know. There are coaches on the staff that know what they're doing. It's just the message doesn't get there defensively. I mean, you can't go now basically a decade and being this bad year in and year out without having something very deficient in what you're doing and what you're teaching on the defensive end of the floor. I've long maintained that the best course of action is to bring in a dedicated defensive coach, go that route. Yaklich, who did it at Michigan, he's available after losing his job at UIC. I think there's worse places that you could go. But it came up in the conversation, and what I was done, not just to the NCAA tournament, the lack of success there, and not getting to the second weekend, but even the Big Ten tournament. So I look back. And over the last 10 years, after Fran's got this program kind of up and running, right? It took a while to build that thing up, but on the close to the NCAA tournament team in the third year, fell to Michigan State in just an absolute screw job by Ted Valentine and company in that game in Chicago in the Big Ten tournament, a win there against Michigan State, and I believe Iowa would have been dancing. But since that moment, I was played in 10 Big Ten tournaments. Of course, no tournament in 2020. 10 Big Ten tournaments. In those 10, they had a Big Ten championship. That was great. 2022. Outside of that, they have lost their first game 6 times. 6 of the last 10 years, Iowa has been one and done in the Big Ten tournament. I say, all right, what's the big deal? Iowa's usually middle of the pack. Not awful, not great, but middle of the pack. In all 6 of those losses, all 6 ones and dones, they have lost to double-digit seeds. Double-digit seeds every single year. 2014, as the 6th seed, Iowa lost to 11th seeded Northwestern. 2015, lost to 13th seeded Penn State. 2016, lost to 12th seeded Illinois. 2017, as a 7th seed, lose to 10th seeded Indiana. And then here the last 2 years, losing to Ohio State. Last year, the Buckeyes were the 13th seed. Iowa was the 5th seed. And this year, Hawkeyes the 7th seed. The 10th seed of Buckeyes got them this past season. It's not just about the big dance. It's also the Big Ten tournament. That is laughable. To have that many losses, 6 losses to double-digit seeds in 10 Big Ten tournaments, that's also something that needs to change. It's not just the NCAA tournament. It's also the Big Ten tournament. One great run, and it was a great one with Murray and company and what they did a couple of years ago. It needs to be more than that. This program, I still believe, Fran McCaffrey is a coach that can continue to win with the Iowa style. There's going to have to be some retooling on this roster. What are they going to do with Tony Perkins? Does he enter the portal? Can they bring him back for another year? Can they find somebody better? Iowa's got to go shopping in the portal, and they need guards. Up front, I think you're feeling good. Could use another big potentially, but it's about finding guard play. As we've seen, and we see year after year after year, it's about guard play come March. Does Iowa have it? Certainly not the way the roster is built right now. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We'll be back with you tomorrow. A lot of football. Spring football is underway. We will hear from Kirk Ferentz later today and get our initial thoughts on this spring football season, what we're going to see, the implementation of the new offense with Tim Lester. We'll talk plenty about that. Also get you ready for Iowa, Colorado coming up this weekend in the Sweet 16 on the women's side of things and retooling that Iowa roster. What exactly that means, we'll break it all down. Your team every day. That's what we do here on the Locked On Network. And thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Hey, also want to let you know what we have going on right now on Locked On across our 24/7 streaming channel. You're watching Fox Sports, ESPN all day on your TV. Do you have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch right now to Locked On Sports Today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Fire TV Channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We got you covered here on the Hawkeye side. We got you covered all over the place. NFL draft coming up as we are inside of a month until the NFL draft. You're getting ready for that. Maybe it's a baseball season. You see my Minnesota Twins hat on. I'm pumped up for the Twins season. They got you covered over there. MLB, NFL, NBA, NHL, and of course here on the college side with Locked On Hawkeyes. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Go Hawks.